So anyway, Bart, I've now made 2 videos for you at the Muscle Factory in Pratamanak.
Yeah, thanks for that.
No, thanks for inviting me back. So what we've covered so far is nutrition, training for over 40s, and it got me thinking, and this is honest actually, since I've spoken to you, now when I'm going out into restaurants and eating indoors, I'm thinking more about what to eat. But I am confused because I don't know what I should be eating and what I shouldn't, because there's too many mixed messages out there.
There is, yeah.
And I think that's what you wanted to sort of talk about today.
Well, it's like anything. If you look at coffee, if you research coffee on the internet, you're going to get a 50% good and 50% bad. There's so much information coming from both sides. You get confused. But there's also a lot of myths out there, and that we continue to believe as truths. Because if you tell a lie often enough, then it becomes a fact, all right? So number one myth out there is the salt. And I think I covered that once in a video about the salt. And from that video alone, I had many people call me up and say, you know, after I started salt, I feel a lot better. When you present an argument like salt is good for you, you must back it up with facts. Otherwise, you're just a crackpot. The second biggest myth, and I reckon it would be the biggest crime, medical crime to humanity, is the cholesterol myth. We're so bent on bringing cholesterol down when we should be doing the opposite. Your brain mass sits in cholesterol. Every cell in your body is encapsulated by cholesterol. All your sex hormones uses cholesterol. If cholesterol is so bad, then why does your liver produce 3,000 milligrams per day?
And listen, this is interesting. Whenever I go for a health check, they tend to say you're healthy, but your cholesterol's a bit high. Yeah. So is that actually okay, what you're going to say?
Yes, because let's go right back to where it all started, the myth. So there was a Yugoslavian doctor, his name was Ensel Keys, you can look him up, and he does this thing called the 7-country studies. So he was paid by the US government $200,000, and back in 1956, that was a lot of money. They wanted him to find the connection between cholesterol and heart rate, or heart attacks. In research, you keep looking for it until you find the answer. So whatever narrative you have, you keep researching until you find what supports your idea. And that's what he did. Now, he published the 7 countries study, but he actually studied 22 countries. And when he looked at the 22 countries about the connection between cholesterol and heart attacks and strokes, only 7 of those countries supported his ideas. The other 15 actually showed the opposite, that high cholesterol was good for your heart. It had no ill effect. Until today, there's no research that actually links cholesterol and heart attacks. There is none. But he published it, and because he was funded by the government, published it, everybody jumped on it and said, this is fantastic, we should tell the world about this, okay? He was so popular, he said, don't eat eggs, don't eat butter, don't eat beef, don't eat meat. He said, be very careful because it's got the saturated fats, be careful. He made the Time magazine in 1961 that he was going to be the savior of mankind. Now obviously Big Pharma in the background goes, people need a pill for that to bring that cholesterol down. Now here's an interesting fact. Today we get told not to have more than 200 total cholesterol. But when he did the research came out and said, don't eat more than 300. So even with his skewed science, basically a faked study, even back then he was saying, don't eat less than 300. Now we're on 200. It wasn't until we got to 1980, we brought it from 300 down to 220. And then in 1991, we brought it from 220 to 200. Well, guess what happens is, every time they bring it down, Big Pharma comes out and says, I've got more customers. Now they're talking about bringing it down to 180. Eventually they'll bring it down so low that every person on the planet will have a cholesterol problem, so everybody be on a pill.
But then it's not a problem then, because I don't understand, why do doctors that people trust, that you think are outside of any corruption or conspiracies, still measure your cholesterol and tell you it's too high?
Fear. It's out of fear. It's the one guy that stands out from the rest. Like if everybody's on board saying this and then you go against the establishment, you don't want to be the odd guy out. Now, okay, luckily that myth has been pushed for 50 years, but the new generation doctors and even some of the older doctors are actually coming out saying it doesn't make sense, because when they released the study, there was a whole bunch of doctors says that doesn't make sense. We depend on cholesterol, why are we cutting it out? There's also a correlation. When we started reducing the cholesterol, we saw the rates of dementia go up. Now, Alzheimer's was a disease that wasn't even around in the 50s, and yet in the 60s and 70s, it started to appear. And now it's the 4th biggest killer in the US. And yet Alzheimer's is a disease from the brain which resides in cholesterol, and that's the very thing that we're bringing down.
So cholesterol actually is
in the brain,
supportive and healthy for your brain.
Yes. So now, remember, Enzel Keys made the Time magazine in 1961 on the cover, and they said he's the savior of mankind. And he demonized eggs, butter, and all that sort of stuff. Did you know in 2014, butter was on the Time magazine as being as a superfood? So the thing in 1961 where butter was bad, all of a sudden now in 2014, it's on the same magazine saying how wonderful it is. It took 50 years for people to start to wake up. Now, last year, in 2015, the USAID, which is the health organization in America, actually made a statement saying that it is of no concern to eat cholesterol in abundance. I actually have the very fact here. I'll read it to you. So for those people who go, really? Yes. Not a nutrient of concern for the consumption of overeating cholesterol. So in 2015, the US Health Department actually said there is no concern to overeat cholesterol. In 2016, there was a massive study done by Japanese research who basically said because of lower cholesterol, we have more problems as we get older. We have more dementia, we have more cancer, we have more erectile dysfunction because we're lowering the very thing that the body needs. Remember, your body makes 3,000 milligrams. If you have erectile dysfunction in the bedroom and you've got low cholesterol, that is the reason. And there was a gentleman, he was 85 years old, he lived till he was 92. They went and researched him because at 85 he was still fathering children. So everybody's like, how are you doing this at 85? He had something like over 100 children at 85. He was saying that he was eating 25 eggs a day. Now, he didn't know what he was doing. He said, oh, I don't know. But we worked it out later on that he was on the world's first Viagra. Because of all that cholesterol. Now remember, we shouldn't confuse dietary cholesterol with blood cholesterol. They're totally different. But we always associate eggs with the cholesterol in our blood. No, the liver determines what to do, and the liver determines what cholesterol to make. So here's a guy who had no idea what he was doing, but all he knew that if he kept eating eggs, he could keep fathering children. So he was really onto something way before we figured it out.
But yeah, when we eat eggs, like the bodybuilders, when they take their 12 eggs a day and they take the yolk out,
yeah, that's a big mistake. But
because they think it's getting rid of the cholesterol.
No,
is it something like that?
No, the bodybuilders take the yolks out because they don't want the excess fat. Because you've got to remember one thing. The body's really, really good at running on carbohydrates, and it's really, really good at running on fats. But it sucks doing it at both. It says, well, pick one, because if you run both, I must store one of them. It's impossible for me to run on both. A bodybuilder predominantly runs on glucose because he needs to power the muscles in his gym when he's working out, right? So he then decides, I'm going to eat more carbohydrates than I will fats. So he then takes out the fats. He's not taking out the cholesterol, he's just removing the fat because he knows he's running on a lot of carbohydrates. Because he also knows that the body can't run on both at the same time. It's not very good at doing that. So that's a completely different setup to why he does it. But if you said to me for health reasons you take out cholesterol, then I'm saying then you're doing the opposite thing. Just like salt, people reduce salt when you should be doing the opposite. Don't reduce your cholesterol, increase it. Now the USDA actually says we should be up to 300 milligrams. And yet we hear from the mass media and big pharma saying, no, we got to bring it down to 180. There's a huge disconnect to what reality is.
It's so confusing. I want to keep going with this. I know we were going to try and go for a shorter interview, but every time I talk to you, it consumes me, and I'm sure for people watching now, it's the same. So if we can just keep going a little bit, because you just ask more. You're just asking me more questions. I don't know. You can see why people are confused because the people they look to for answers through the generations keep getting it wrong, but so wrong that sometimes it's the opposite to what they're recommending.
Right, and it's because we've been misled. But we've got to remember one thing. Your doctor, he may be the greatest man on earth. He may be the kindest human being that there's around. But he's an allopathic medical doctor. And that means he was not studied in the field of nutrition. I am. I'm a licensed dietitian. I sit next to these guys. And when these guys do nutrition course, it is half a semester on one book. And they go, there's your nutrition knowledge. You don't go to your doctor with a broken laptop and say, can you fix my laptop? He's not qualified to fix it. But we put doctors on the God status, and then we believe everything they say. If he can't fix my computer, he's clearly the wrong person to go to. I should take it to an IT guy. So if you've got a health problem and it's related to food and diet, don't go to your doctor. He's an allopathic. You have to go to a dietitian, a naturopath, like a person like me, a licensed dietitian, because we studied that for 8 years. Because doctors' only job is, think about this, is how to treat the symptom, not to cure. So he's going to give you medicine so you can get on with your day. He's not there to cure you at all. Now on top of that, now you may call me a nut, conspiracy nut, but he's also heavily influenced by the big pharma. There's a reason why all the farm reps are absolutely stunning girls. They come in, they try to win him over, try to sell him a pill so he can then push that onto his patients, right? So he gets also influenced and sidetracked. Now, if you look at a doctor generally, the amount of studies he does, the last thing he's going to do when he comes home is continues to research on nutrition. It's not in his field. An endocrinologist does not go and look into what's happening with the food side of it. A nutritionist does. But you'll start to see now with a lot of the new younger doctors, and some of the older doctors too, even on YouTube, are starting to come out and actually tell you the truth. If you keep looking for them, they'll come out and say, you know, we've been wrong. Look, here's a book that I recently got, The Lies the Doctors Told Me. And it's the same thing. This was a very profound doctor, and he said the same thing. As a doctor, he was wrong. He also said there was things that we were told that were not correct, but we went along with it because we didn't want to be the odd guy out. So we just went along with it. And then the licensed health practitioner jumped on board as well. And then if Big Pharma's involved, well, what do you think Big Pharma's going to do? They're going to keep pushing research out there to support their narrative. They're not going to say, hey, I want you to find what's good about the cholesterol. Here's a research and find out what's bad about cholesterol.
So everything is a farce. And, you know, so just because you're not wearing a white gown and a stethoscope...
I don't get taken serious, yeah.
And yet, because the doctor wears this white overall, he feels, even though he's not an expert in the field of nutrition, that he can give that advice, and the person listens to him and thinks, he must be telling the truth.
Yes, yes. But for me, I see the results in my clients. I could do a lot of clients, high blood pressure, you name it, they've got it. And I fix them with nutrition. And after about 3 weeks, a month, fatty livers, I can cure like that. Whereas these guys were on statin drugs. Now, you've got to remember what statin drugs do. They don't just lower your cholesterol, they do so much more. I've had people on statin drugs, and once I took them off the statin drugs, they don't have the joint aches. Because it also affects your heart. They can breathe better. They have more energy as they go along. You can control cholesterol by not reducing it, by increasing it. So here's the thing. We demonize cholesterol, and then we also make cholesterol sound good, right? So we call it LDL and HDL. So one is bad and one is good. But what would you say if I said to you, both are just equal? Okay, do we actually understand what cholesterol, LDL and HDLs do? And most people don't, because I always ask them. Okay, so the LDL is a transporter. It's called low density lipoprotein. So cholesterol gets transported by a protein. So one goes out and one comes back. So we call the one that comes back the high density lipoprotein. We call that as good cholesterol, and the little one that goes out, we call it as bad. But why is the little one going out? The little one is literally going out there to save your life. He goes along through the body and fixes all the damage that glucose did to you. Think about that. Glucose did all this damage. So here comes along, let's say, imagine it was a road, and you come along and you see a pothole. Then the guys jump out, get some tar or bitumen, and they put in the pothole, and then they move on to the next pothole. Now when you put the pothole, you always got residual left, right? So HDL, the good one that we call, will go out, pick up all the remainder, and bring it back so they can reuse it. So they go, let's put it all together and can reuse it. So it goes back to the liver, and it goes back into what we call the GLUT4 receptor, and it recycles it, and then reconfigures and says, right, let's send it back out again. Where the danger really lies is if the truck is going out more than the truck that's coming back. That means there's more and more residual left on the road. One day you're going to get a flood, and all that's going to get washed in the drain and clog it up. You see what I mean? So the body does the same thing. It's constantly going in there to repair, and it also is constantly bringing back anything that you didn't use. If the ratio starts to separate where the truck is going out more often than it's coming back, you have a problem. And we call that remnant cholesterol. Doctors these days aren't looking at your total cholesterol. They're looking at the difference between LDL and HDL and see what the gap is. And it's called remnant. Anything less than 13 nanograms per deciliter, we go, that's fine, we can handle it. But once it starts creeping up over 23, the doctor literally says, we have a problem. You're a heart attack walking around. Yeah. So remember, you've got 4 hormones that makes glucose, but want to control that 4 hormones. And then we as a society decide that we're going to add the 5th glucose, and that's the food. And the body's going, really? Honestly? You think my job wasn't hard enough? Now I've got to do 5? And this is where insulin resistance comes into it. And insulin resistance leads to type 2 diabetes and fatty livers. Why? Because we constantly get told to eat lots of carbohydrate. The food pyramid is upside down. We go 60% must be corns and grains and wheat. Interesting fact. If fat makes you fat, then why do dairy farmers fatten up their cattle with corns and grains? Shouldn't they be feeding them butter and eggs? Doesn't make sense, right?
No, and no one questions it, right, because you just believe what you're told.
Right. If fat makes you fat, then all these farmers would be saying, all right, pig, you're going to be eating eggs and butter. They don't. You know what they do? It's a very simple little trick. They take away all their minerals and vitamins, because minerals and vitamins controls your malnutrition. So they take it away. So now they're hungry because they're lacking minerals and vitamins. Now they feed them corns and grains, and there's no off switch because they just keep eating and eating and eating.
And they're not getting what they want.
Right, so they're missing the nutrients, so they keep eating corn and eating grain. And because of corn and grain converts to fat so fast, this is why they gain so much weight in such a short period of time. They fatten up livestock by eating corns and grains, not by eating butters and eggs.
So just on a side point, when you eat a pizza, it's the base, not the cheese.
Yeah, exactly. And I know people who do the carnivore diet that will buy a pizza and just eat the topping. I do the same. I'm on a carnivore diet too. I kind of go carnivore, low carbs, because I'm thinking the same as everybody else. Well, in my field, like, why are we eating carbohydrates when the body can make its own? We're just making more problems for the carbs, for the body. And here's an interesting fact. Carbohydrate is the major cause of inflammation, and every chronic disease you die from is inflammation. Right? So why are you fueling that inflammation? So right now, I do my blood work every 6 weeks, because I'm not going to be a hypocrite and tell you what I'm eating and then tell you I'm in perfect health. So my last result, so you've got this thing, there's an inflammation mark called the C-reactive protein. So anything below 0.1 is considered really healthy, where it means your body has no stress, no inflammation. Mine's at 0.3. I've been doing carnivore diet for 6 months, and my inflammation mark has been going down, 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 down. But here was an interesting fact. I eat 20 whole eggs a day in butter. I have 10 strips of bacon every day, and beef. So I'm like the worst guy out there as far as the cholesterol myth goes, right? But my cholesterol, I'm struggling to get my cholesterol higher than 200. I do my level best to get it over 200 because I want it to be up to 300, and I still struggle. So through my frustration, I eventually reached out to a friend of mine, a doctor called Ben Belknap, and I said, am I correct to assume that because I'm not eating carbs, I have less inflammation, therefore my liver is not producing as much cholesterol to fix the damage? And he goes, correct. Your liver will adjust. If you don't bring in enough cholesterol, it makes more. If you bring in too much, it makes less. It only makes cholesterol because it has to repair. So if you're not having any damage, the body says, well, I don't need to make as much to repair. So,
it's really interesting, but I'm going to wrap it up now, because I could talk with you for ages, and I hope everyone really makes some learnings there. So I'm going to conclude by saying, don't believe everything you hear. Speak to experts and come to your own conclusions from what your body responds to, something like that.
Yeah, my biggest advice is, if it relates to health, as far as nutrition goes, go find the guy that's an expert in that field. Don't take your notebook to the doctor to fix. He's not qualified. You go to a doctor because, for me, either you're broken arm or you need surgery, he's qualified. But everything else, he's not. He's, like I said, he may be the loveliest guy in the world, but he is not qualified when it comes to nutrition at all. There's a reason why there are licensed dietitians in hospitals.
Speak to them. Okay, Bart, thanks very much.
No problem.